Now, I've covered this 2 or 3 times, but never really in depth. I've always covered it by accident because we had to cover something in it. However, now we'll do the chapter intending to do it. So it may take a few lessons to get through it. We'll attempt verse 1. Matthew 24, verse 1. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. Okay, the parallel accounts to this are in Mark 13 and in Luke 21. Matthew and Mark are private events. In Luke, it's a public proclamation. There's a big difference in the two. They focus on different events. Luke is not the same sermon or the same audience. In Matthew, look down at verse, or go back a chapter and we'll get the context. Matthew 23, verse 37. Jesus says, "Ye shall not see me henceforth till ye shall say, Blessed is he," so forth, so on. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple. He left the temple, and his disciples came to him. That's Matthew 23, 37 down to 39. Going through the end of the chapter there, you see the events. Matthew 23, verse 37 to 39. The context for where we see Jesus in chapter 24 is this. The event was this. In 23, he told off the scribes and the Pharisees. Then he says in 37, you're not going to see me again until you're ready till you're really crying out for me and saying, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. And Jesus departed out from the temple, and his disciples came to him. So it's a private nighttime lesson that focuses on Daniel's 70th week. Look at it in Matthew 24, verse 3. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, is that in the temple? No, that's not in the temple. The disciples came to him privately. That is, it's a private meeting, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? Now, I read it right that time. It's hard to read that right. Because what we naturally do is we naturally think that's 3 questions, but that's not 3 questions, even though it looks like 3 questions. How many question marks are there? 2 question marks, so it's 2 questions. In Luke, he does something a little different. In Luke chapter 21, Luke 21, verse 1. Luke 21, verse 1. These preterists will pick the hardest passages in the Bible to make a doctrine on, and then if you're going to explain it, it takes you 6 months to get them to understand what the thing said. Matthew 21, verse 1. And he looked up and saw the rich man, and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury. He looked up, means he was present. And he looked up and he saw it. Look at 21, verse 2. And he saw also, so from the same standing position, he looked over and he saw something else. A certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites. And he said, he didn't leave. He's talking right here. Of a truth I say unto you, this poor widow hath cast in more than they all, for she hath given of her, for all these have given of their abundant, for all these of their abundance cast in unto the offering of God, but she of her penury hath cast in all the living that she hath. Verse 5. And as he spake of the temple, as some spake of the temple. Okay, so he's still in the same audience of people. He's not moved. He's not left yet. This is different than what we saw in chapter 24. In 24, we saw he left the temple and he says, This is yours. Your house is left to you desolate. I'm out of here. You won't see me again till you're saying, Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. And he went into the Mountain of Olives, and his disciples came to him privately. That's in Matthew 24. Here he's still in the temple in Luke 21. 2 different events. Mm-hmm. And as some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts, he said. So then he preaches a sermon. Now, it's just normal for a preacher to do this. He gets a message, and then he's just hot to trot, and anytime he can, he's going to give it out. So he's giving some of the same information that he'll give his disciples when he's talking privately with different details. But here he's going to give them some of the same information in this sermon in the temple that is being given on the Mount. So that doesn't mean it's the same. Just means it has some of the same information in it. Look at Luke. Let's get the context for Luke's passage. Luke 20, verse 45. In Luke 21:5, it said, and some spake. So who's the some that spake? In chapter 20, verse 45. And in the audience of all the people, so there's a bunch of people around in the temple, he said unto his disciples. So the disciples are there and a bunch of people. That's a different crowd. Well, in the audience of the people first, he said to his disciples. So it's like this. You're in a crowd and you really want to tell the crowd something, but you don't want a conversation with the crowd. So I point to one person and I say, hey, that Obama, and I'm talking to this one person, but I know everybody else had listened. Okay, this way, he's the one I'm going to respond back and forth to, and the rest of them just have to hear they're not part of my conversation just because they can hear it. Here's what he said, 46. Beware the scribes. Where do you think he is? Right there amongst all the scribes. And so that's the way we would do it. We'd say, hey, you got to really watch out for those scribes. You know, they're crooks. Watch out for them lawyers while you're sitting in the law office. And then he goes on, verse 47, which devour widows' houses and for a show make long prayers, the same shall receive greater damnation. Ooh, that's a hot sermon right there. It's a public lesson. Of course, he's addressed it to the disciples, but it's intended for way more than just the disciples. And the people in the temple, Luke 21, look at verse 7. And they ask him, saying, Master, but when shall these things be? And what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? That's Luke 21:7. So who is the they? The they is obviously the crowd there. So now here's an odd thing. His disciples don't say master. That's a Judas phrase. Judas loves to use that. But so do the scribes and the Pharisees. Look at verse 27. Luke 20. Go back a chapter. Luke 20, verse 27. Luke 20, verse 27. Then came to him certain of the Sadducees, which deny that there's any resurrection, and they ask him, saying, Master. See that buttering up when they don't mean it? Look, verse 34. And Jesus answering said unto them, there's this crowd, the children of this world, so forth, so on. Verse 39. Then certain of the scribes answering said, Master. Some Yankee, that sounds like a Yankee word, master. Verse 41. And he said unto them, how say they that Christ is David's son? So he asked them something that's beyond their scope of understanding. And he wasn't expecting them to teach him. He was teaching them. Verse 45. Then in the audience of all the people, he said unto his disciples. See, he keeps doing this. This is the way he does it all the time. He's doing this. So this is the public event. It's public. All the people are there. Now, some of his disciples are there too. You'll notice something interesting about the Luke parallel passage in Luke 21. People will tell you this is the same passage as Matthew 24. It's similar, but I wouldn't say it's the same. Could have happened in the same day, but one is to a different crowd. In Luke, there's no mention of the abomination of desolation. That's a major point in his sermon in Matthew 24 and in Mark 13. But it does not appear in Luke. In Luke 24, something else triggers the events. Matthew 24, verse 16, he says, after the abomination, that thing, after Obama gets on the throne, abomination of desolation, then he says this, Then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains. Okay, so that's the event, and here's the result. Here's the problem, and here's what you do about it. The problem is the abomination, and here's the answer. That's not what's going on in Luke 21. Luke 21, they still flee, but they flee for a different reason. In Luke 21, there's armies that encamp about the city. No mention of Daniel's 70 weeks. Matter of fact, Jesus calls Daniel out by name, but here he doesn't. He just ignores it. So it must be a different event he's referring to. The last half of Daniel's 70 weeks, there is the event where they have to flee to the mountains, because that's what Daniel told them. And that's when you see that abomination of desolation, then you flee. In Luke, it's a reference to an event that does shortly come to pass, and that's Titus coming in and wiping out Jerusalem. It's an event that will happen, and it does happen. But they're not to flee because there's an abomination of desolation, because Titus doesn't bring an abomination of desolation, but he encamps the city with armies. 3 different battalions siege the army, and he leaves them there for 18 months while he goes back because his father is made emperor, or whatever they called him back then. Luke 21, look at verse 12. Luke 21, verse 12. He says, but before all these, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you and deliver you up to the synagogues and to the prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. Very different than how he words it in Matthew. Now, notice here he says, here's things that are going to happen, and before these happen. So he's laying out a time frame. He's giving you sequences of what comes first and what comes second. Matthew 24, look at verse 6. Matthew 24, 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. That's the way he times it in Matthew. Verse 29. 24, 29. Matthew 24. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the solar system quit. The cosmic events happen. So he says there's a tribulation event, and then something happens. In Mark, he said, before this happened, something else has happened. Okay, so you've got 2 halves here. You got 2 halves of the tribulation. One's the first 3.5, one's the last 3.5. The last 3.5 are the worst of it, of course, but none of it is fun. Luke 21, verse 12. No, I just covered that. Okay, Matthew 24. Matthew 24, verse 1. I think it's the same day. It's probably, yeah, I'll show you when it happens. He's going to actually tell you what time of the day he does it. Okay. Matthew 24, verse 1. He says, and Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him. Okay, he left. He left because he's already told them in the previous chapter, this house is empty, I'm leaving. If I'm not here, there ain't nothing in here. And that was a fact. He's the builder and the maker. And if the builder and the maker ain't there, you've got an empty shell ready to collapse. And that's a fact. The disciples came to him. Look at verse 3, Matthew 24, verse 3. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives. Well, he can't be sitting on the Mount of Olives and be in the temple. So his disciples coming to him is something very different. He can't be speaking to all the people. Now, we saw over there where they love to use the phrase master to butter him up. That's the crowd, and that's their way of giving respect. You'll see them use these phrases now. They use the phrase apostle. There's no apostles, but they think they're being honorable. The other phrase they like to use is reverend. That's not a good term. They're trying to reverence you. Man ain't to be reverenced. Only God. So anyway, so Judas is probably the one stirring up this master comment. And that's just like Judas. You notice the focus is all about money, the gold and the beautiful stones. And look at the value of this, man. Now, there's a reason probably behind that. They think he's about to take over, to be their king. Where's he going to rule from? Right there. It's all going to be theirs. Look how wealthy we're about to be. Looking for what's in it for me. Look at Mark 1 or Mark 13:1. Mark 13:1. This is another private encounter or another account of the private encounter. And as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples said unto him, so this is a disciple who says, keyword, Master, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here? Okay, well, we can identify that character right there. Probably pretty sure that's Judas Iscariot. That's the way he likes to talk. But what Jesus does is he pulls a fast one on Judas. Judas says, well, y'all go on up there and I'll meet you later. I got to check on some things in the temple and, admire some more stones for a little longer. So when Judas is not present, that's in the private meeting when Jesus begins to answer questions and give information. Because Judas is the one he's going to talk about. He's the abomination of desolation. So he's going to talk about him, but not when he's present. He's going to be left behind. Mark 13, look at verse 3. And when he sat upon the Mount of Olives over against the temple, Peter, James, and John, and Andrew asked him privately. So there's 4 disciples present, and that's who he's given the private conference to. The public one is public, and Judas is present. But when it's private, it's only these 4. And their name. Let me see how much of this. Okay, I think we can do another verse. Matthew 24. Look at verse 2. How come I lost my place over here? Matthew 24:2. He says, and Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. What Jesus says to them is something that's already happened once before. In Jeremiah 52, and that's what the book of Lamentations is about, is the last time Jerusalem was destroyed. This is something God does. You see this. He likes to repeat events so we get the message. But when we don't get the message, the next time he repeats it louder. Just like we do. The present fulfillment is, of course, going to be when Titus comes in and levels it in 70 AD. However, it's already happened before. And that ain't the end of it either. It's going to happen again in the tribulation when the abomination that makes death sits down. Then it's going to be destroyed. Really? Real loud. So loud the heaven's going to shake. Yes. The problem with a preterist position is the details of Revelation. That's what kills them. Is they say, okay, we can prove this happened in history in 70 AD. Therefore, it looks like some of those events are already spoken about in chapter 24. Therefore, it must all fit. You don't want to force things to fit. If a detail doesn't fit, you set it aside and say it fits somewhere, but that ain't it. If it doesn't all fit, it don't fit. The events of Revelation would have to fulfill themselves in 70 AD as well, if Matthew 24 is the culmination of Jesus' return, if that's the second advent, and it's just a spiritual event. You see, what happens is Nothing in the book of Revelation can be literal, because those things literally say what they're going to do and what's going to happen. And when they don't happen that way, then they say, well, it must have been spiritual. So now the Bible doesn't mean what it means, and you got to ask them what it means. Of course, the 144,000 didn't show up. Ask them there. Where's the 144,000 that were promised? If that's the second advent, where are they? Where's the two witnesses that got their heads chopped off and laid dead in the street for 3 days and then jumped up and left? I don't see any accounts of that. That would have had to have happened. Where was the mark of the beast? Now they come up with some wild things for what they think the mark of the beast is. Give them one more. This is the linchpin. Where is the abomination that maketh desolate? Where did that happen? Did not happen with Titus. He knocked the buildings down. He didn't set up a pig. That was Antiochus Epiphanes in 200 BC. That's the only time they could point to it. And Jesus says it's still future. Well, if Titus didn't do it, who did it? Nobody's done it. It's still yet to be fulfilled. It has to be actually the thing that he's claiming. He says when it's in the Holy of Holies or the most holy place, stands where it ought not. Okay, well, that means something's got to be in the temple, in that holy place, not some figurative. I've heard them say this. What they think it was they're worshiping the beast, which is all of the Caesars wanted to be worshipped as God, which that's true, they did. Their coinage had their image on it. You couldn't buy or sell without their image. Okay, that's stretching it. They say this too. You had to get a business license to buy or sell. Which, okay, so what? That's not the mark of the beast, and it's not standing in the temple where it ought not. So they're stretching things here. And of course, the end did never show up when they said the end ended, because I'm still here. Or I showed up. I wouldn't showed up if the end had happened. All right, Matthew 24, verse 3. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, his disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Okay. So the throwing off of the stones and the temple being destroyed, that's a major concern. It should be. He's just gone into their most holy place and said it's going to be leveled. Wouldn't that be a natural question? To come to him and say, when? When's that going to happen? For a Jew, that's where he could worship God. They couldn't worship God outside of their country. When they're in Babylon, they can't. In Luke, it's the crowd. Here, it's the disciples, the four. They're named in Mark, and they're not named here. But this is the four that's here. That's the four that is there. Correct. Obviously, Judas at some point instigated all this master business. But I'm just being facetious about that. That's what all the scribes and the publicans and the Pharisees did. Here's why they did it. If I'm calling you master, you're going to turn around and call me master. So if I've got an honorary doctorate degree and I call you doctor, then I know you're going to turn around and call me doctor. If everybody's a doctor, who cares? Yeah. This question will be answered in a series of verses. It'll be verse 4 to verse 14. And in the middle of those answers, he gives them a phrase that people can't quite get, but you've got to get this or else you don't understand any of the answer. He says, he that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. Yeah, verse 13. Okay, that's the point of it, is here's how you get salvation. Now, it doesn't mean salvation from hell. What are they getting salvation from? From being destroyed alongside of the temple. Okay. Being saved, we'll understand, to go into his kingdom. They want to know what's the sign of thy coming. They understood a future fulfillment. Think about it. Who are they talking to? Jesus. He's standing right there. And they ask him this question: what's the sign of your coming? It'd be like this. Chris walked in the door and I say, hey, tell me when you're going to be here. Okay. It's a flicker. Okay, so they're understanding he's coming back. It's a second coming. Else they would have said, how long till we do this? No, his coming means he's got to leave to come back. They understood a little bit. And they add something else. And the end of the world. That's part of the same question. They recognized when he comes back, it ends the world. Second Advent, Armageddon. They understood that much. When the second Advent comes, when he returns, he's a destroying king, a dictator, military. Now, he doesn't mean when's the end of Jerusalem, which is the way the preterists take it. They take it as a single event in one location. But what what Jesus is talking about here is global events and things that affect all nations, not just one. Okay, so I showed you the question marks there. That tells you how many questions there are, and that's a big one to miss because there's a comma in there, and it's just natural to read it as though it was three questions. But you have to adhere to the punctuation. The punctuation tells you meaning. So when there's two question marks, there's only two questions there. Look at yes. Mhm. Verse where are we? Verse 4. And Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Now, when he says this, Christ, he doesn't mean Jesus. They're not going to show up and say, I'm Jesus. Although we've seen a lot of people do that. That's not what they're going to say. They're going to say, I'm Christ. Why? That means Messiah, the anointed one. Well, we know somebody who does that right now. The Pope. He's called the vicar of, not Jesus, of Christ. He's in the place of Christ. Yeah, well, that's what his title tells us he is. Verse 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. He's saying these things are going to happen, but don't get too worked up about it. It's part of the process. That's not really saying that's a sign. That's not a sign. It's a non-sign. There's going to be, you're getting warmer. You know, kids play that game. You had something and you're supposed to go look for it. Kids say, okay, you're getting warmer, you're getting warmer. That's what he's doing here. The wars and rumors of wars just getting a little warmer. You're still far off, but getting a little warmer. Now, we've seen wars and rumors of wars more so than these people ever thought of. We've got more nations now that can war, so they're warring. So it's more in our day than it was that day. So our day would be more of a fulfillment of it than what was the day he's talking here. Look at it in verse 7. He says, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famine and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. Okay, so he's saying here, nations and kingdoms are coming against each other. Let me ask you something. Were nations and kingdoms coming against each other when Titus came in and destroyed Jerusalem? No. Israel was already a subject to Rome. Rome could do anything they wanted to with them. because they were their subjects. They answered to Rome. So that's not a kingdom against a kingdom. That's a kingdom fine tuning its borders, adjusting its authority structure. That's all that is. Those are kingdoms of man, nations on nations. That's going to happen over and over. Daniel 4, verse 17. Daniel 4, verse 17. Daniel 4:17. He says, "This matter is by the decree of the watchers." That's a wild thing right there. The watchers. I guess they didn't know how to name it back there. So Daniel looks out there and he says, "Okay, this is a result of what's going on by the watchers." What he meant was these people got a TV and they're onto every news program. And you'll find that today. People are addicted to the TV programs. And you know what the news is showing 9 times out of 10? Some war somewhere, some rumor of some war somewhere. Putin can't get it right. And why is Ukraine got an actor in the place of a president? And it's one thing after the next. It's wars and rumors of war. He says, don't get distracted by that. Now, what happens? We get distracted by that. So be careful, you're not the watcher. And the demand of the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdoms of men. So if you're going to watch any of that mess, here's what you should take away from it. The Most High is ruling in the kingdom of men. That should be the response to any time you hear about wars and rumors of wars. The Most High is ruling in the kingdoms of men. That's right. And the world may be giving its allegiance to the devil, but it does not matter because God's running the board. He says, whoso and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. Now I think those two go hand in hand. He's setting up all of these kingdoms and these rulerships that we know now are set, have a man set over them that's running the show, that is, according to God, the basest of men. Some of the worst you could pick. Here's why. So that you will understand the Most High's ruling in the affairs of men. We look at that and we say, now why in the world would God allow a pagan like that to be running the show? How's God letting this person get away with that? It's so you'll know God's in control. Look at where did I stop? Verse 7. So go down to verse 8. Matthew 24. He says, all these things. So what's these things? Wars and rumors of war, um, nation against nation, and kingdom against someone coming against me. Yeah, false Christ. He says, verse 8, all these things are the beginning of sorrows. Okay, so that's the beginning of sorrow. In the Old Testament, Daniel's 70 week is referred to this way, is a woman in travail, in sorrow to bring forth. Okay, he says this is the beginning of the travail, the beginning of the sorrow. Okay, so it's not really, we're not into it yet. This is the beginning. Verse 9. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Now, that couldn't have happened in 70 AD. All nations did not hate the Jews because of Jesus. The ones who hated the Jews hated them for demonic reasons and monetary reasons, but not because of Jesus. There was very few nations back then that were known. The Goths, the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Huns, they're not involved in any of this. They don't care anything about a Jew. Nobody in Europe cared anything about a Jew in 70 AD. However, he says all nations. Well, there's going to come a day that all nations fulfill that, and it'll be a future event, and that it'll fulfill itself. And we've seen them head that way now. He says in verse 15, beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Matthew 7. Oh, I didn't tell you where I'm. Matthew 7, verse 15. Matthew 7:15. Beware of false prophets, which shall come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Now, there's more to this than just somebody telling a lie. They're a false prophet. They are prophesying something. They're prophesying something that's wrong. And he says on the inside, there's something different than they are on the outside. So you got one of two possibilities here. They're devil possessed, or they are a devil that put on human flesh. And both of those will happen in the tribulation. And that goes hand in hand with what he was saying. Don't follow after anybody who claims to be Christ, and there's going to be a bunch of them show up. And there will. Look at it in Deuteronomy. No, don't go there. That's too long. Go to Hosea 4. Hosea 4, verse 18. Here's the thing that makes no sense from a human standpoint. Their drink is sour. They've committed whoredom continually. Her rulers with shame do love, give ye. Now you're going to find it's more than just the ruler, it's the people crave this too. Hosea 4, verse 18. Give ye, that is, let's make a payoff. It's bribes. And like Mexico, the whole country run on bribes. I think most foreign countries are that way. Everything's run on a bribe. And that's the way the rulers like it. Give you. Okay, who do you know? It's we're seeing it in America now like I would have never imagined. And some of that's coming to light nowadays. But all that's the power struggle. And what's behind it is the thing the devil's always used, coinage, money. Root of all evil is that right? That thing you can put in your pocket jingles around. That's why the government's still shut down. Yeah. Look at it in Matthew 24, verse 13. Here's the real way you know this could not have happened and been complete. He says, Matthew 24:13, but he that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. Okay, so does that mean if it's salvation like we think of it, saved to go to heaven, does that mean that anyone who escaped death was suddenly saved eternally? Titus killed 1.5 million Jews when he came in, but he didn't kill everybody. So could anybody, even if they were a Herodian or a Sadducee and a Pharisee that didn't get killed, would they be saved? Would that grant them salvation from hell? Obviously not, because look at the gospel that is associated with this salvation. Verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations. There's a nation thing again. And then shall the end come. Okay. So the gospel's got to go out to all the nations. Most preachers will tell you the gospel has to reach all the nations, and they use this, and it's a mission thing, missions conference. Get the gospel to all the nations. That's the wrong gospel. The gospel that goes to all the nations before the end is the gospel of the kingdom. Yeah, a Jewish gospel about the millennium. And the gospel message is this: the good news. Gospel means good news. So what's the good news of the kingdom? The good news to the kingdom is this: endure to the end. Grin and bear it. Here's your good news for the day. Toughen up, Buttercup. Wow. Different system altogether. Jesus talks about great tribulation. Look down at verse 21. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Now, he should have done away with the Bible in 70 AD altogether if 70 AD fulfilled it. Because we've seen some events that are worse than 70 AD. And it's Jesus who says right here, this event I'm talking about will be the worst ever. Well, I've seen some that were worse than Titus. So, I mean, I didn't see him. I know about him. Not quite that old. But so if things have gotten worse than the time we can point to in history, then that time he's talking about there, 70 AD, can't be the culmination of the event. Obviously, it can't be the end of one's life because everybody's life ends. Everybody on the globe always endures to the end of their life. Even if they pull the trigger and end it themselves, they still ended their life and they still lived until they didn't. Everybody. Yeah. So, what's the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? That's a major question that needs to be answered. Daniel 12. Daniel 12, verse 4. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Okay, same events. This is what Jesus is clarifying. He's expounding on what he's already given to Daniel, the information. Some of it Daniel's been able to say plainly, and some of it he said, hey, look, don't even tell him anymore. Jesus will be down there soon enough, and he'll give him the details. Look at verse 6. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? Okay, that's man's always got the same question. How long till the end? When is it over with? We have the same question as we live life. When will this ever end? Okay, the same here. That's what the disciples have come up and they've got the same human question. When is this going to end? It's going to be a terrible event you've just told me about. When's it going to end? The end of the verse is going to be tribulation. It's going to be the end of Daniel's 70th week because he's speaking to a nation. And that nation triggers events for all nations on the earth. This is the thing people miss. He did not number Israel among the people, among the nations. They're left out. Why did he leave out Israel? Because they lead the nations. As Israel goes down, so does the rest of the world. So it's going to be bad news. And we'll probably pick it up there because I've got too much more to go here. Okay, so yeah, we'll go through Matthew 24 and pick up all the fine details on it, and then you'll be able to handle doctrines and predators and all that come along. It's better to know the real than to study all the counterfeits because there's always a new counterfeit that comes along. But if you know the real, then you can always line up the real alongside a counterfeit and tell what the counter is. All righty, we'll pick up at Hebrews 12. No, not Hebrews. Matthew 24. I think 14 next book. Yep.